Hello and welcome back. Eddie Radosevich, George Stoya here from the SoonerScoop.com studios. Welcome back to the SoonerScoop.com YouTube channel. Josh McCuisition down in Sooner Scoop HQ, Houston, and another recruiting report this week as we enter the third-ish week of spring football. We'll be back out at practice on Tuesday evening. I think we're going to go Tuesday, Thursday. We will talk to Brent Venables on Tuesday night after practice. That'll be the first time that we've talked to Brent here since they've really started spring practice. We talked to him at the beginning. It'll be good to kind of catch up. Got a lot of items to get to today here on the recruiting report. Josh, the girls, are they in on the Caitlin Clark experience that we had on Monday night?
We were watching a little bit of it last night. There was definitely some interest. Lainey, though she has never played at a game of organized basketball or even been in like a basketball practice, she plays it like at recess with her friends. Okay. So she thinks she's kind of a hooper. She kind of has that dream.
Well, I can teach her. I can shoot the ball. Eddie knows.
That would be interesting. I think that would be good. You know, that would.
I'm a baller.
I scratch that from the record. I don't know if we want to enter into those sweepstakes, but it was awesome last night. Obviously, the Final Four set on both sides, but there has been a lot of recruiting news. Josh, you were down in close to you on Friday, down in how do you say it? First off, you talk about a name that I just cannot say. Atasosha, Atachocha. How do I say it?
The worst part is I can never tell if you honestly can't say it, Eddie, or if it's a McCuisition thing. But no, it's a Atascocita.
Atascocita. I can do that. But Oklahoma has added a 10th commitment in the 2025 class by way of four-star running back Tory Blaylock. You were down at his announcement on Friday. You caught up with him afterwards. You can see that interview on Sooner Scoop editorial page. One of the probably more memorable announcements, as you see here, with him trolling a little bit, putting on the Texas hat, and then obviously I like the sign, the arrow down too. That was pretty good. But Oklahoma adds Tory Blaylock to the mix, Josh, and just another really, really good get for DeMarco Murray and crew.
It really is, and I'm with you guys. Obviously, you know, I had talked to Tory earlier in the day. We'd done an interview, and I'm like, every once in a while, that'll happen where you do an interview and then the kid just he was just kind of giving you a blind fake. So this one, he held that Texas hot just long enough for me to be like, oh no, is this about to be a really bad day? Yeah. Because and the funny thing is so when I'm watching it, I've got the camera on the tripod, the video camera, and I'm shooting with the photo camera as he's doing it. So I can't really see the down sign until it's right in the forefront. So the alarm should have passed for me a few seconds before it actually did. But I like I told Tory, I thought it was really well done. They sold that well. Then they had the whole, like I said, the TikTok, the balloon popping, and it had the crimson and cream, color confetti in there. So, it was a fun announcement. They put some interesting twists on it and did some fun stuff. But, again, this is a guy like we talked about that is a guy that DeMarco Murray offered in the spring of 2022. So this is a guy – this isn't some guy that Oklahoma just kind of stumbled onto or anything like that. This is a player they've liked for a long time. And again, people will look at his junior numbers and kind of say, oh, that wasn't humongous. But at the same time, he was splitting a lot of carries. Atascocita, they pushed Galena Park North Shore to the absolute limit. North Shore, home of Caleb Von Shashawn, this year's number one corner in the country, Devin Sanchez. You look at it any way you want to. North Shore just pumps out major prospects. And, Atascocita had enough talent to really push them. So, I wouldn't get too caught up in that, but the same time, and we talked about it a little bit, this is a guy that was part of a 4x100 meter track team that just set the national record for the fastest time. They were the first team to ever go under 39 seconds in the 4x1. So that gives you an indication. This guy is blazing fast, probably in that legitimate 10.5s, probably on his best day could push into the 10.4s, really, really can run. And you see him. I made a comparison to Tatum Bell, like that kind of same straight line explosive speed.
Josh, I was going to ask, what does he do best as a running back? You mentioned the speed, home run hitter, I think is what you wrote in your breakdown of him. But what is the one thing that he does best as a running back?
I think that's the easy answer. But I think if you wanted to dive a little deeper and really watch, the thing that will surprise you about Tory is I think he's a really smart runner. Like he's not a guy that's super laterally quick or anything like that. He's very much one cut north and south. But I think he does a really good job of not just watching the first block, but he's setting up that second block, or at least trying to set up that defender to where he's got to take an angle he doesn't want to take. There's a clip in his junior reel where he actually goes the wrong side of the block, and you can see it. You recognize, okay, he's not where he's supposed to be because his blocker is taking the guy from the right, and he should follow off his blocker's backside. We all know that. But if you watch, he's looking at the safety that's coming down into the box. And when he goes to the other side, the safety can't make that angle. And Tory ends up going for like a 35, 40-yard run. I think it was a touchdown. So that was one of those plays where I watched it the first time. I was like, oh, that didn't look very good. And then I kind of saw what he was doing. And you're like, okay, that's pretty smart. And I think that's something that maybe because everyone, including myself, talks about his speed, they don't talk about enough how well he kind of sees the field and will set things up that maybe aren't immediately in his, I guess they aren't the first decision he has to make sometimes.
We've always talked about guys coming in from really good programs, whether it be in the state of Texas or the state of Oklahoma or wherever across the country. I've always talked about how important I like that guy's prepared. He knows what it's about basically when you get to the level of playing at a school like Oklahoma, particularly early. How much did it help that his dad was an NFL running back? He talked to you about that a little bit. He talked about his relationship with DeMarco, just in terms of he's been there before. I know kind of what I'm getting myself into. But his father, Derek, was a very good running back and had a really nice cup of coffee in the NFL.
Yeah, I mean, a 7-year pro. I mean, Derek knows what he's doing. And, for those that maybe don't realize it, the announcement took place at his father's training facility, Armed Sports Performance up in Humble. Or Humble. You're not supposed to say the H. I don't know why. That's the weirdest thing ever. But and Derek is a guy that's very active, trains a lot of current NFL guys, so he's very much in the loop. And and that's something that Tory talked about was going to DeMarco and not just oh, that's going to be really tough, but like my dad has prepared me for this. Like I know what the expectation is, whether it's, not just, okay, my coaches expect me to do things, but how I'm going to behave myself off the field, how I'm going to do things, the little things that we know Brent Venables and those guys, they love. I mean, they respond to those kind of players, and Tory just has a maturity to him because, again, like so many of these guys we talk to, and Eddie, you've done plenty of interviews, it's all new to them. It's all bright-eyed, and they've never seen it before, and no one in their family's ever been around these situations. That's not the case for Tory. There's nothing he's going to do that his dad's going to be like, wow, that's amazing. I mean, like, his dad's kind of like, check yourself. Like, you're not there yet. Now, at the same time, people will say that, hear that and kind of think, oh, there was no one at that announcement more excited than Derek Blaylock. He was running around with his Boomer Sooner flag, and he's leading chants and trying to get Texas fans to say Boomer Sooner. It was pretty great. It was fun to watch somebody, that has accomplished a lot that was still really just excited for his son in that moment.
Josh, he's the only running back in the 2025 class right now, I believe, for Oklahoma. Is he going to be the only one, or is there anyone else out there that Oklahoma's looking for? How many guys do you think they'll take at running back?
I think this is going to be a one-back class. I think when you look at it, we've talked about it a lot, guys. We knew this class was not going to be like last year where they were willing to stretch to 28, 29, really get up there in the numbers if they had to. So I think you're going to see a little smaller class, and this is one of the positions where they're willing to say, okay, let's take Tory. We think he's a good get. He's one of our primary guys. And then let's go ahead and wait till 2026, where, as we've talked about, Oklahoma's looking at a great situation. You've got Jonathan Hatton already committed. You've got Caden Jones, the in-state legacy that I think we all I think rightly expect to probably end up at Oklahoma. And then you've got Javian Osborne at Forney, Texas, who is the only back in the country that On3 currently has ranked ahead of Jonathan Hatton. He's the number one guy in the country and has been up to Oklahoma 4 or 5 times since last summer. So Oklahoma's in great shape there as well. And they're not going to get all those guys. We know that. But however it shakes out, Oklahoma's kind of playing a numbers game of saying any 2 of those 3, and we're in great shape and we can move forward. And you don't jeopardize those numbers because in 25, it's not a great running back class, in my opinion. And especially not in the region. You're not seeing a lot of those Texas guys like you are. You know, I mean, again, the 3 I just mentioned, 1's in Oklahoma and 2 are in Texas. So it just makes a lot of sense for Oklahoma to be patient here. They've got some bigger needs. Obviously, I think that entire running back room could return in 25, if I'm not mistaken. So there's a lot there to say, hey, there's no reason to go crazy here because of not only what 2025 looks like, but where they are already in 2026.
2025, just again, to put it into perspective, with the commitment of Tory Blaylock, Oklahoma currently with 10 commitments in the class. That would put them number 12th overall in the team rankings. If you want to take a snapshot of that and look against some of your new brethren in the SEC, I don't know if this is going to scare you or just kind of give you an idea of where things stack up. They would currently be 6th in the SEC with 10 commitments in that class, which just it's a little bit of a different world. I think everybody knows that. It's just wild to put that out there.
Guys, can you think of I can't think of the scenario when OU, and obviously recruiting rankings only go back so far, and really the length of time that they are very seriously tracked. OU's been an outstanding football team and has pretty much been 1 or 2 in the Big 12 throughout that period of time. But I can't fathom a time probably in history when they would have had the number 6 class at any point in the Big 8, the Big 12, like that's not a thing. And it's not that the class isn't outstanding. It just tells you how much deeper the water just became.
It's going to be fun.
Yeah, take that however you want.
Yeah.
You guys can debate that amongst yourselves in the comment section. 2025, you do have Kamori Moore already in the fold from Lee Summit North, a school that Oklahoma fans, I'm sure, are quite familiar with. Alexander Shield Knight at edge, and some recent momentum for Trent Wilson, who got an RPM on Tuesday morning from Chad Simmons, and continued success along the defensive front, especially when you combine that with what's already on campus with the 2024 class: David Stone, Jaden Jackson, Nigel Smith, that group of guys. But Upper Marlboro, Maryland, Henry Weiss High School, 4-star defensive lineman Trent Wilson. Seems like there's some momentum for Oklahoma there, Josh.
Yeah, that was, guys, I'll be perfectly honest, that prediction surprised me. Now, it's not that I didn't think Oklahoma had a chance or was a contender, but for a guy like Chad, and we should shout out our new brethren at On3, Steve Wiltfong has actually now followed him in and made a prediction himself. And, those are, I don't think there's any question. Those are the 2 best national guys in the business. And excited they're both on our team. And secondarily, with those guys being willing to make those kind of predictions and the understanding they both have of how that will affect how everyone is looking at that recruitment now, I think says a lot. And for Oklahoma, like I said, when you look at that and the impact that one visit he's taken, he was at Ohio State last weekend, guys, and this prediction's now in for Oklahoma. He's been to Penn State like half a dozen times. And obviously with Maryland there nearby, there's a lot that, Texas A&M was his 4th. I don't know, Maryland, I don't know where that came out, but those 4, Oklahoma's the one that he has the least familiarity with, but Oklahoma really hit that visit out of the park. I was told that just went exceedingly well, but at the same time, I still thought Oklahoma was probably running second to Penn State. That was kind of my impression. So this is big news for OU. This is the kind of guy, we talked about it for a few weeks, like who was going to be that defensive lineman that kind of kept that 2024 momentum going with the David Stones and Nigel Smith and Danny Okoye's. Who was going to be that guy that you keep building that depth with? Like who's the next one? And I think Trent Wilson could be that guy that really helps you because he's so versatile. He's a Brent Venables guy. Certain schemes he's going to play outside. Certain schemes he can play inside. Really fits what we know of Zach Alley. So this is, you got to get there. We all know that a prediction's not a commitment, but it's a really good sign for Oklahoma. There's no doubt.
Josh, I was going to ask, and you kind of answered my question about him maybe being the centerpiece.
I do that too much. I apologize,
No,
George.
you're good.
Yeah.
Him kind of being the centerpiece of this defensive line. But let me ask you this. OU obviously feels good about it. He seems to be in a good position with Oklahoma. Who are the schools, though, that Oklahoma is going to have to kind of fend off here to get his commitment and eventually his signature?
It really, again, you don't want to ever write off A&M because we know both Mike Elko is a very good recruiter, and as well as we know about A&M's resources. They can impact you in a lot of different ways. So that's always going to be something you have to manage. But I would say probably Penn State and then followed by Ohio State, just because obviously Penn State has a huge advantage of the proximity. That's why he's been there so many times. He's going to make his decision and have seen Oklahoma twice. He went for the unofficial a little earlier in the spring and then is going to come back for his official visit in June. So there's not going to be as much of a chance for his family, everybody to have seen it, to really know everyone. But I thought his comments to Chad when he announced his top four were really interesting, where he talked about Brent Venables being the only head coach that he really talks to and really has a relationship with. That kind of stuff can be really telling. Like I think that, and then you follow it up kind of when the kid starts talking about home. And that's what he talks about with Penn State, like kind of feels like home. Those are key words that always kind of perk my ears up. And the fact that those two are the two schools, I think that's probably who this comes down to, kind of his relationships with Oklahoma or the familiarity, the close to home and all that stuff that Penn State has going for them. And again, these predictions, I know everybody's going to, just start counting Trent Wilson as part of Oklahoma's class. There's a long way to go. There's a lot of work to be done. There's a lot that can change, especially in this era like I'm talking about with A&M and all the NIL things that we all know all these major programs can bring to bear. Things can happen fast. Like you can think a guy's done and then, somebody decides they want, to make a much sweeter offer. That can change things really fast and has nothing to do with a player, Oklahoma's recruitment, their work rate, their connection. Sometimes you just lose on I guess you couldn't call anything but a bad beat.
OU fans having PTSD with the A&M stuff just every year.
4 official visits set up for Wilson here coming up, and he's doing them all during the summer, Josh. He'll be in Columbus, Ohio on May 31st, Happy Valley June 7th. He'll come down back to Norman for the second time a week after his trip to Happy Valley on June 14th, and then College Station on June 21st. So it's going to be a busy summer for Wilson. Does it seem like he would be wanting to make that decision or announcement or commitment at some point before the start of his senior football season?
That would be my guess.
Yeah.
I'm going to guess that he'll come back. Now, what is interesting to me is if this starts to look more like a 2 or 3 team race, can Oklahoma get him to move that date, or would they want him to move that date to June 21st and have him part of the barbecue weekend and all the guys? And, they're going to have a lot of commitments on campus. They're going to have a lot of their prime targets on campus. All those things. That's interesting. That's a possibility. Now, at the same time, I think Oklahoma is very mindful of, we don't need 20 of our top uncommitted guys all there on the same weekend. That can backfire on you. That can be, we didn't get to spend all the time with the guys we wanted to spend. So there's a give and take there. But I wonder about that a little bit, and if Oklahoma would choose to move that around if they could. And we'll have to see. We'll kind of see how that plays out. But if A&M seems to be running fourth and maybe they turn their focus elsewhere, maybe that could happen without, without Trent Wilson having to worry about upsetting anyone, making any moves that would displease a school he was interested in.
In terms of the defensive line unit, who else is on kind of your big board in terms of guys that might be alongside a Trent Wilson that Oklahoma should be very, very active with in this 2025 class?
Yeah, and actually, I should tease a little bit. I'm working on the updated war board for everybody to look at, which kind of has all of Oklahoma's offers, where I kind of rate their chances. Just it's a very 1,000-foot view kind of look at things, but it does give everybody an idea where to focus. I would say at defensive tackle are a couple of guys. Again, kind of like Trent Wilson, because we've talked about it. This defensive line group in Oklahoma's region is just not where it was a year ago. It was like all the guys from two classes all ended up in 2024, and Oklahoma did a great job, so it works out. But they've had to stretch out a little bit in 2025. Floyd Bucard, who's at Miami Central, he's actually Canadian-born, spent his junior year in Alabama playing high school football, and now he's at powerhouse Miami Central. So I think Oklahoma's in really good shape there. They should get an official visit. I believe he's told me June 14th, but I need to be sure that's right. And then Cole Breiler is expected for the Champion Barbecue, another guy out of the Hun School in New Jersey, same school that Logan Howland came from. So there is those are two guys on the inside. The edge is and that's what's so big about this Trent Wilson situation is it gives Oklahoma some solidarity probably on the inside, which is where I think Trent Wilson ultimately projects. But with the defensive ends, Oklahoma's in pretty good shape with some really good players. You mentioned Alex Shieldknight already being committed. I like where they are with Max Granville a lot, the edge rusher from Fort Bend Christian in Sugarland, Texas. And then another one that I think people just tend to overlook is Smith Arogbo, another guy from Houston, Leaf Hastings. Really liked his visit back in the spring. To me, it's just a question of does Oklahoma based on how they've operated the last couple of years, I don't think they say no to many linemen that they think are of a certain level. If you hit the mark, they're going to find a way to get you in that class. And I think that's what they're kind of operating under. So I know there's been some talk of, well, does Oklahoma have room, that kind of thing. They know there's just such a finite supply of big bodies. If you can get one, you need to take one, and then let the rest of it kind of sort itself out after the fact. But I like if they can get Trent Wilson, this defensive line class starts to look a lot less murky to me as far as where the impact guys they're going to need start to come from.
On the heels of the Trent Wilson news on Monday, we also got news Louisville, Texas, 5-star offensive tackle Michael Fusi, a name that I think is probably pretty familiar, or the Oklahoma fans are pretty familiar with. He makes his announcement that he has cut his list to 7: Southern California, Oregon, Texas A&M, Oklahoma, Missouri, Georgia, and Texas for the 6'4.5", 285-pound offensive tackle.
Yeah, and it's not surprising, but every cut you want to be involved with, especially in a guy that Oklahoma has made such a priority. I mean, this has been one of Bill Bedenbaugh's guys from very early on. There's been a lot of, Oklahoma's slipping. I think people get lost sometimes in, well, Oklahoma led for him or, seemed to be the leader 6 months ago. They must have slipped off. No, he's just taken other visits. He's seen other schools. Those schools start gaining ground. Like it's not that Oklahoma's done anything wrong. He was quick to check that with us, Eddie, when we talked to him at Under Armour. He's like, oh, no, I'm still great with Oklahoma. I still like that. I like everything about the program. From everything I've gathered, his parents really like the idea of OU for him. So I think that's been a big part of that recruitment is not just Michael, but really the family as well. And I think that's been a big part of it with Ty Haywood as well. So what that means, I'm not sure. I wouldn't pick Oklahoma right now for Michael Fusi, but I think, and I'm trying to find it in the story, but I believe in the story, he kind of talked about 7, and then he goes, well, I've got 4 that I'm really tight with. And he mentioned Missouri, A&M, OU, and Texas. I think those 4 are far and away the most likely. I think it'll probably come down to the 3 former Big 12 programs, I guess Big 12 South programs, since half of the SEC is now Big 12 schools formerly. But yeah, I think it's going to be A&M, OU, and Texas. And I really think it comes down to OU and Texas. I think that's where this thing ends up at some point. I still probably would pick Texas in that race. But Missouri can't be ruled out because we know they're doing a lot of work in NIL. They've definitely caught his eye. He's been up there a couple of times over the spring. And he'll return to Oklahoma for the first time in a while. I believe later this month. I'm trying to remember my dates exactly, but Michael is still very high on Oklahoma. I think people, because he hasn't been in a while, are letting that impact their thinking too much.
Josh, he's not announced a commitment date, right? Is that right?
No, he is not. He is still open.
When do you think he'll maybe want to make a decision? Is he one that could go into the season next year?
I would be surprised just based on his decision, or I mean his official visits. Usually that's kind of an indicator. If guys are talking about it into the season, okay, maybe. But my guess is he's another one of these guys. I think we're going to be kind of like 2 summers ago when we covered, PJ Adebawore, Caden Green. Oklahoma had that run of like a month there where it was like 11 commitments in 34 days or some crazy thing like that. I wouldn't be shocked if that's what you're looking at this summer, where the vast majority of Oklahoma's 2025 class is in the boat by August 1st. Like, I think that's probably what that's going to be. Now, last year we saw a little more spring activity. It wasn't so summer heavy, but Oklahoma now with 10, we're going to get into another guy that could make it 11 here shortly. But beyond that player, I think Oklahoma is going to do the vast majority of their remaining work kind of from June 1st to August 1st.
Seems like more and more of these guys are trying to just get it over with, and then all of a sudden you go through your senior season and you're packing up and you're basically headed to college. For some of these kids in the state of Texas, basically 2 weeks after you get done with the high school football playoffs. It's kind of a unique trend. You mentioned that Oklahoma might be on the verge of commitment number 11 in the 2025 class, and it is a name and a family that is quite familiar with Oklahoma. Michael Hawkins already on campus, taking part of spring football. Younger brother Malik Hawkins will be making his announcement on Wednesday, April 10th. Oklahoma feeling pretty good about this situation, almost a little bit like the Bowen brothers in a way that, obviously he wants to go through his recruiting process, talking about Eli. He ended up at Oklahoma. Could the same be said for Malik, who makes his announcement coming up next week?
It's one of those things, and it's a lot like Eli, where you almost feel like you're trying to build the suspense on their behalf,
Sure.
But to both Eli's credit and Malik's, they've not tried to put a lot of smoke screens out there, or like you haven't heard like, oh, this school's really making a run, which you hear a lot in these situations. And I think that's a credit to, again, like we talked about with Tory Blaylock, they have a father that's familiar. He went through all this. He did the recruiting. He was kind of early in the recruiting chaos, Michael Sr., and then has done, college at the NFL, the whole thing. So I think they just they're like, we don't need to do all that. We don't need to be chaotic. And even Mike Jr. was very, very subdued last year. There wasn't a lot of chaos around his recruitment or anything. There was talk, and then he moved on. But with Malik, I want to say it was Arkansas, Texas, Oklahoma, Texas State, and I feel like there's somebody else I'm forgetting in his little announcement graphic. But again, could it be someone else? Sure, possibly. I sure have trouble believing it, especially because, part of me wondered, okay, maybe if Mike doesn't hit the ground running in Norman and they kind of say, let's see, or whatever it may be. But guys, we've all heard the reviews. There have been some people that are really excited about Mike Hawkins. So I think that makes it easier for his brother to feel like, hey, man, we're going to be together. We're going to be there. We can play. And with what Oklahoma's building in that secondary, they can take Malik. I think he's a guy that's a little bit of a tweener between safety and corner. He's got great size. He can run. I'm very interested to see kind of where they project him at, but an interesting player for sure. And Oklahoma, like I said, with what they're doing, not only with what they have on campus, but with guys like Kobe Sellers, Tristan Haynes, some of these corners they're already in on, and we've talked a lot about the safety work. You put that class together, Malik Hawkins can just kind of walk in and fall where he's going to fall. And I don't mean that negatively. I just mean they can kind of see what's best for him, and it can all kind of work itself out. So he actually fits in that scenario pretty well.
Josh, I think from the outside looking in, you mentioned the Bowen brothers, and I think some people would say, oh, well, they just like Eli because of his brother, or they just like Malik because of Michael, and they took one just because they got the other, whatever that may be. That doesn't seem to be the case. I know that wasn't the case with Eli Bowen. They really liked Eli Bowen. He's done really well in spring so far. I'm guessing that's the same for Malik. They really like Malik and think that he can help them.
Again, guys, we talk all the time. When you look at it, you would say that Eli is of these two younger brothers. You'd say, oh, he's not the guy, because we know Brent Venables and that staff, they love traits. They love big, long, fast athletes that they're, they don't have to be great football players yet, but they want guys with really great skill sets. And then, we'll coach them. We'll get them where they need to be, that kind of thing. And I think that's the way they look at that. They trust themselves to develop. And Malik has again, he's 6'1", 180 pounds. Like I said, can run. Was part of a Frisco Emerson team that went to the state semifinals in Texas 5A last year. So this is a good player. I think people, largely because it's been so foregone that he was going to end up at Oklahoma, I think people have kind of overlooked him and not watched the tape. But I actually went back and watched a little bit of it this morning. And again, this is a guy that has tools. I mean, there's plenty to like there. Now, I think there is still a lot of rawness. He's still got a lot to learn. There's still, I don't know that he is a plug and play guy or anything like that. But if you give him time, like I said, let him fill out that frame, let him kind of find where he's going to be. There's no reason he can't be a successful player at Oklahoma. So I don't think Brent Venables is really in the business of taking guys to take guys, because he knows how important every single guy is in an 85-man roster, because you take one guy that shouldn't be there, the other guys feel that. They see it. They know, hey, this guy doesn't belong with us. And I think that hurts your locker room, and we all know that's something that Brent Venables is very, very big on.
Not to mention, we're talking about whether it be Tory Blaylock or we're talking about the Hawkins brothers. We're talking about sons of former NFL players. That's not a bad thing when you're putting together a roster full of guys that, obviously have some really good genes. So we shall see. It's going to be kind of interesting to watch here over the course of the spring. Recruiting visits are ramping up as well. I know that, just in the times that we've been out at practice here over the last week and a half, there's been guys here and there, coming in and watching practice, and that will continue here over the course of the next few weeks, probably even ramp up a little bit as we get closer to the spring game coming up on April 20th, Josh.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. You're going to see these lists start to grow and grow. And I have one that's running. Guys, I'm expecting just here later this week, Lamont Rogers, the big offensive tackle from Mesquite Horn, should be back again. Ty Jackson, I believe, is the number 16 overall player, number 1 linebacker in the country from Florida. He'll be there. Dawson Merritt, a linebacker that Oklahoma offered very early from Kansas, who's kind of really, when they offered him, I don't think everybody knew who he was, and we've just watched his stock go up and up and up. And he's tried to make it down a couple of different times. It hadn't been able to happen. So this is a big time for Oklahoma to get him down. But yeah, guys, it's just going to be weekly. Marcus Wimberly's coming back. Jaden O'Neal, the guy that I think is a very realistic possibility to be their 2026 quarterback, is going to be here a week from today. So there's a lot of guys coming in, and it's daily. It's just a slow and steady kind of stream of 3-4 guys that kind of come in. You check in with them, see how it went. But yeah, and of course, like you said, Eddie, it all leads to April 20th, where we know they're going to have some guys there. And I should say, and I know we talked about it in the pregame, this is my fault not having this conversation ready, but Dakota Terrell, the guy from Pecola, Oklahoma, that came to practice last week. You guys had a chance to look at him a little bit, picked up an offer, and is, for those that don't know at home, Dakota's a big-time basketball player listed at 6'9", 210, and is a guy that could play a number of positions. He's a very interesting offer for Oklahoma.
He's so tall.
I sent you the screenshot of one of the clips that we got of him, and we would love to share it with you, but we can't take pictures of recruits on campus, even though we see them with our eyes. Don't get me started. He towered over Joe John Finley and Miguel Chavis, which are rather large gentlemen. Mm-hmm. And I thought just his shoulders, too. He looks like a guy that could develop himself given the right and this isn't a shot at Pecola High School, with the right guidance, I think he could be a defensive end.
He could
didn't
definitely
get the
put on
feeling,
like 40 pounds.
Right.
Easily.
I didn't get the feeling that this guy's a tight end, just basically on that side of the football. He looks like somebody that could carry the weight to play defensive end in the SEC.
Yeah, and that's the thing. So when he made the offer, he tagged both Miguel Chavis and Joe John Finley, and like you mentioned, Eddie, he was talking to those guys while he was on campus. But what was interesting to me is I talked to a couple sources, and it was kind of like, could he be a receiver? And from some people that would know, it was like, we wouldn't rule that out. Like, I mean, it was very much like, he's such a good athlete, we're not closing any doors. Like, there's a lot that they think is really interesting about him. And guys, I mean, you talk about that kind of length and that kind of size, like Dakota doesn't even have to get near the quarterback to be a massive problem. Like you talk about just get your hands up. Okay. Like you're shutting off a third of the field. Like if you're close enough to a quarterback. So I think that's really interesting. And like you guys talked about, his height was really impressive. But what I noticed and what you guys sent me was he is a lot bigger in frame. I kind of expected him to be kind of narrow shouldered, kind of leaner looking guy, but no, man, he's got plenty of room to fill out. And you can understand why Michigan has offered him and why a lot of schools are starting to get involved. And, just to be kind of quick about it, I've talked about it in some of the stuff on the site, Sooner Scoop and Woke and those kind of things. There is a lot of interest in Oklahoma. He was very clear that Oklahoma is kind of the school he grew up following. So I think that offer is not just a token offer. That's a meaningful thing that he was really excited about.
Should be interesting here in terms of the recruiting stuff unfolding here over the next couple weeks. As we said, Josh, while we have you here, we've done a couple practice reports. I know that we've talked about some stuff off, not on camera, just in terms of some of the stuff that you have heard coming out of spring football. Anything sticking out to you just in terms of, post-scrimmage? Last Thursday, we'll be back out there on Tuesday night seeing a 30-minute portion of practice as well as Thursday, and then we'll talk to Brent Venables. Anything sticking out to you, though, just in terms of what you've heard from the first couple weeks here for Oklahoma Spring Bowl?
Well, we'll start with a couple of good and bad, and I'll try to keep it fairly short. But first, I would say Ivan Carry-On. Everybody I talk to, he's really impressed people. It's not just, and I told people, I was like, hey, look, he's going to do some stuff in the spring, and everybody's going to get excited, but just be patient. Talking to some people, I think they're going to have trouble keeping him off the field. They're very excited about what he brings. Secondarily, I would say the two young defensive tackles, David Stone and Jaden Jackson, are kind of ahead of where Oklahoma had hoped they would be. I know people struggle with this. Jaden is more ready to help them right now. David Stone does some things in practice where people are like, holy crap. Like if he can do that snap to snap, he's going to be a true problem. And again, that's no slight at Jaden Jackson. Jaden Jackson has an NFL future, possibly. David Stone, there's a little more ceiling there, but right now he's not as refined and doesn't play with the pad level and do some of the little things that make Jaden Jackson really good for just a freshman. And now that I've said all the good stuff, the offensive line, it's a work in progress, guys. It's not where it needs to be. It's not where they want it to be. And that's, I think people will overreact to that. And that's okay. I understand. But yeah, guys, that's 5 new starters. Like, there was no world where this offensive line was going to be great in the spring. That was not, I don't care who you're bringing back. 5 guys who haven't played a lot of football together, and some of which are learning a new system. That's not a recipe for success, at least at this point in the game. So again, don't everybody run around with your hair on fire. Like, give it time. If there's anything Bill Bedenbaugh is, if you want to hang his hat on, he usually gets a cohesive unit as time goes on, but there is time required to get there.
I would say, too, on the offensive line is, I will say, being out there at practice, I like the pieces that they have a little bit more than I did going into it. Like, seeing Heath Ozeta out there, I've been big on him. I've been his biggest fan. He looks great. I think Fabechi Wiwu has been really good so far through spring, better than maybe some anticipated. It's the tackle spot where I'm kind of like, man, I don't know. I mean, Jacob Sexton's been a little bit dinged up. Spencer Brown certainly hasn't been the player that I think people thought he would be. It's Jake Taylor's still playing at right tackle. Michael Tarquin, you kind of know what you're going to get. And then center, Troy Everett goes down with a knee injury last week. We don't know exactly how serious that is, but they're struggling there at backup center too. But I do like some of the pieces they have. It's just, can they find how those pieces fit together? And that's been Bill's kind of specialty. It might take some time. It might take halfway through the season to figure it out. But I do like some of the pieces, and I do think that they also know that they're going to have to maybe dip into this spring portal a little bit and at least get some reinforcements at certain spots.
I always wonder, too, that, when we get the reports back or we hear what happened during a scrimmage, you always get mixed-matched units. I want to see what the 5 looks like if you were going to go out and play Auburn today,
right,
or Tennessee today. Like, you always kind of wonder what that mixed match, and is that, you got to have all 5 guys working together. How much does that really tell you about where the offensive line is?
They're tinkering with it.
That's right.
You go out there and Bill's not throwing out his best 5 in the scrimmage.
It's understandable that they don't have 2 really good groups.
Right.
You know what I mean?
And I think it's also a depth thing. Like, sure. I think it's also like some of these guys, like a Jacob Sexton, probably isn't going full go because they know if Jacob Sexton goes down, they're screwed. Like, they can't afford to lose any more of these guys. And so it's hard to tell. And here's the other bottom line and the reality of it. The defense should be dominating spring practice right now. I mean, you talk about guys that have now been in the system for 3 years. It's a defensive head coach that you've got in Brent Venables. You bring in Zach Alley. I mean, if the defense wasn't dominating practice, then I think you would actually be concerned about this team, because that is supposed to be the strength of this team next year.
To me, it's just so crazy how it's flipped, because the last few years it has been tackle. Tackle's been what we all kind of said, okay, that's good. But the interior. But, I mean, guys, when you throw in the stuff you're hearing about Eugene Brooks and Daniel Akinkumi and where they like those 2 young guys, the interior of the offensive line looks like it's in good shape kind of going forward. Tackle, again, that's part of why we talk so much about it in 2025 recruiting. They've got to find some guys that can help them. And, I agree with you guys completely. If, we fast forward 5 months, there's nothing I've heard that changes my mind that Jacob Sexton's a starting left tackle. So people can watch Michael or, hear Michael Tarquin starting at left tackle and, he's running with the ones. Man, just wait. Like, and I'm not saying that it can't happen. I'm just saying there's nothing I've heard that makes me think Jacob Sexton's done anything to hurt his standing. I think they're just, like George said, they're just being careful.
Very good, Josh. We appreciate it. George and I will be back on Wednesday. I had to think about what day it was. We'll be back on Wednesday after we go out to practice on Tuesday for a post-practice report. We'll hear from Brent Venables on Tuesday night. Hopefully get a little bit of clarity on the Troy Everett situation, how long he's going to be out. I think it's probably safe to say he's going to miss the rest of spring, but maybe some good news in terms of when they can get him back out onto the field. Certainly, right now at least doesn't seem like a situation that he's going to be out for the start of the 2024 season. That would obviously not be good news for an offensive line that is trying to come together. So, Josh, we appreciate it. For George and myself here in studio, we'll see you guys on Wednesday for a practice report. We'll see you right back here on the SoonerScoop.com YouTube channel next time.